Pine Hat is not a channel I set up, but I know exactly what you need. Here it is. There is a specific kind of quiet that comes from a show you have already finished. You are not watching Gravity Falls tonight so much as letting it happen near you. The mystery is solved, the summer is over, and you already know how it ends, which is precisely why it works. Your eyes can close. The voices do the rest. Grunkle Stan grumbling somewhere in the next room of your mind. Dipper narrating a journal you have read 100 times. Mabel laughing at something just off the edge of sleep. You do not need to follow it. You only need to let it carry you the way a familiar road can be driven half awake because your hands already know every turn. That half-awake state is its own small country. The plot loosens. Details you once chased for meaning soften into texture, into weather. And a town built on secrets becomes, strangely, one of the safest places to rest, because none of its secrets can surprise you anymore. Tonight we stay with one quiet thread running under all that strangeness. Every villain in Gravity Falls, from the child con artist to the memory thieves in their hidden bunker, and what happens to each of them when the story finally settles its accounts. Not the danger, the reckoning, the slow, satisfying moment each one receives exactly what they earned. So welcome to Pine Hat. Settle in wherever you are. Turn the lights down, let the pillow take the full weight of your head, and let your breathing slow to match the pace of this voice. There is nowhere to be and nothing to solve. The town is waiting, patient and dim, and we have all the time in the world to walk through it together. There is a shape that repeats across Gravity Falls, and once you notice it, you cannot stop seeing it. The series is built, episode after episode, around a single quiet idea about justice, and the idea is more precise than simple punishment. What happens to the liars and the manipulators and the monsters is not that they are hurt. It is that they are handed back their own methods, reversed, and made to live inside them. The con man is conned. The one who erased is erased. The family that locked people out is locked in. This is a compilation, yes, a long collection of moments where a villain gets what they deserved. But the reason those moments are worth stringing together is that they are not random. They rhyme. And this first chapter is about learning to hear the rhyme, so that everything after it lands with the weight it was designed to carry. Consider the child psychic first, because he is the cleanest example of the pattern in its earliest form. In the episode that closes the first season, the one called Gideon Rises, the small-town celebrity who has convinced an entire population that he can read minds, is undone by the most ordinary object imaginable. Stan reveals that the boy's psychic powers came from hidden cameras, tucked inside the pins that Gideon himself handed out to his adoring public at a press conference. Think about what that means as a mechanism. His power was never supernatural, it was surveillance, disguised as a gift. Every person who wore his little token was carrying his eyes home with them, and the trick worked precisely because the audience trusted the thing they had been given. When the cameras are exposed, the crowd turns, and Gideon is arrested for, in the show's own words, conspiracy, fraud, and breaking our hearts. That last charge is the tell. The town does not merely name his crimes. It names its own wound. And here the writing does something more interesting than a clean punishment, something that complicates the very idea of justice it is building. Gideon goes to prison, and prison does not humble him. The inmates, it turns out, love his old psychic stage act, and so the boy who was jailed becomes a popular leader among the men who are jailed with him. His punishment curdles into a new position of influence. The cage becomes a stage. If you are expecting the story to end with the villain diminished, it refuses you, and the refusal is honest. Some people do not learn. Some people simply find a smaller kingdom to rule. The pattern of karmic reversal is real. But Gravity Falls is unwilling to pretend it always produces a moral. Sometimes it produces only a change of venue. The second season sharpens the tool considerably, and the sharpening happens in an episode called Society of the Blind Eye. Here, the villains are not a single con artist, but a secret cult. A society whose entire purpose was to hold a memory-erasing device over the town and wipe away anything the town was not permitted to remember. When they are finally defeated, the show reaches for the most exact punishment it has yet devised. Their own memories of ever belonging to the society are erased. The people who spent their years unmaking other people's minds have their minds unmade in the same stroke, by the same principle. And they will walk out of that hidden room not knowing what they were or what they took. There is no violence in it. There is only symmetry, and symmetry in this show is the truest form of consequence. The founder of that society deepens the tragedy because his fate arrived long before his defeat. Fiddleford McGucket founded the Blind Eye Society long before the story catches up with him, and his own mind deteriorated from using his memory-erasing invention on himself again and again until the man who built the machine had been hollowed out by it. He is not simply a villain who is caught. He is a warning that predates the story, a person who applied his own weapon to his own head so many times that there was very little of him left to catch. And when Blind Ivan, the society's final leader, is defeated at the end of the episode, he is left with long-term memory loss, the very same fate that befell the founder. The last leader inherits the first leader's ruin. The circle closes on itself. What began with McGucket ends structurally exactly where it began, and the machine's final victims are the people who loved it most. From the cult, we turn to the dynasty, and the Karmic engine grows a longer memory. In the episode called Northwest Mansion Mystery, we learn that the founding story of the whole town was a lie. The government falsely credited an ancestor, Nathaniel Northwest, as the founder of Gravity Falls, when the real founder was a man named Quentin Tremblay. So the family's very name rests on stolen credit, a fraud at the level of history itself. But the deeper crime is more physical and more cruel. Nathaniel Northwest lured local lumberjacks into building his mansion by promising them an annual party, and once the mansion was finished, he locked them out. The men who raised the walls were denied the door, and because the hillside had been stripped of its trees to build the house, a mudslide swept away one of the lumberjacks working there, a man named Archibald Corduroy. Killing him as a loose axe struck his head, and with his dying breath, he cursed the Northwest family. That curse is the show's longest-running act of karmic bookkeeping, a debt held open across generations, waiting. It comes due on a descendant, Preston Northwest, who faces the same choice his ancestor made and makes it again. Rather than break the curse to save his own party guests, he hides with his wife, choosing his comfort over the people inside his walls, which is the founding sin repeated almost verbatim. The lock is closed once more, and the release, when it finally comes from the one place the family's logic could never predict. His daughter Pacifica opens the gates to let in the people her family would call commoners, and that single act, the opposite of locking the builders out, lifts the curse. Notice the exactness of it. The crime was an exclusion, and only an inclusion can undo it. Not an apology, not a payment, but the literal reversal of the original gesture. The door that was shut is opened by a Northwest, and that is what the dying lumberjack's curse was truly waiting for all along, which brings us, as everything in this show eventually does, to the monster at the top. In the final chapter of the finale, the one titled Weird Mageddon Part 3, Take Back the Falls, the pattern that governed the con man and the cult and the dynasty is turned against the being who is closest to a god. Bill Cipher is a creature of the mind, a manipulator whose entire power lives in deals, and knowledge and access to what people think. And so the weapon used against him is not a weapon at all in the usual sense. Stan and Ford trick Bill into entering Stan's mind instead of Ford's, and then Ford fires the memory-erasing gun, wiping Stan's mind with Bill still inside it, and destroying him in the wreckage. Look at what defeats the god. The same memory-erasing principle that undid the Blind Eye Society, the same machine that hollowed out McGucket, is the thing that ends Bill. The show's most powerful villain is killed by its most recurring instrument of justice, which means the finale is not introducing a new idea. It is paying off the oldest one. And the price is a real one because Stan gives his own memory to hold the trap shut, which keeps the victory from ever feeling weightless. What is left of Bill afterward is the perfect image to end a chapter of reversals on. His abandoned physical form turns to stone, and it is left behind as a statue in the Gravity Falls forest. A triangle frozen mid-gesture, harmless now, standing in the trees like a gravestone for a thing that thought it could not die. The manipulator becomes a monument to his own defeat. The being made of pure mind is reduced to inert matter, which is about as complete a reversal as the show could offer. And then something happened outside the show that is, in its own way, part of the same pattern of consequence carried into the real world. The series creator, Alex Hirsch, built an actual Bill Cipher statue out of plexiglass, and he hid it, and he ran a worldwide scavenger hunt for it that he called Cipher Hunt. It reportedly ran for a couple of weeks that same summer, and it began, of all places, on the other side of the world, with fans across the planet chasing clues toward a stone villain planted somewhere on the earth. The defeated monster became a destination. The thing the characters left rooted in the forest, the audience went out and physically searched for, which is a strange and lovely epilogue to a story about what people deserve. The statue that marked an ending in the fiction became a beginning in the real world, and the villain who wanted to be everywhere ended up, briefly, being hunted everywhere at once. Consider the shape of a con before it collapses. Gideon Gleeful runs a tourist attraction in Gravity Falls called the Tent of Telepathy, and the entire premise of that tent is a lie told to strangers for money. He presents himself as a child psychic, a small boy with access to the hidden thoughts of the people who pay to watch him. The audience believes it because they want to. That is the first thing to understand about him, and it is the thing that makes everything else legible. He is not a supernatural creature at this stage of the story. He is a performer running a scam, and a scam only works for as long as no one looks behind the curtain. The mechanics of the trick are almost embarrassingly ordinary. His on-stage predictions, the ones that make the crowd gasp and lean forward, are not drawn from any real psychic ability. They are fed to him in secret through hidden spy cameras built into pins. Somewhere out of sight, information is being gathered and relayed, and Gideon simply repeats it as though it arrived by revelation. The whole character lives in that gap. The wonder he sells is manufactured backstage. The boy on the platform is a mouthpiece for surveillance dressed up as a gift. And because the trick is mechanical rather than magical, it is also fragile. Anything that exposes the wiring, anything that catches him without his feed, threatens to unravel the whole illusion at once. For a while, though, the con does not need to rely only on hidden cameras. In The Hand That Rocks the Mabel, the 4th episode of the 1st season, Gideon has a second instrument of power, and it is a supernatural one. He wears a telekinetic mystic amulet on his bolo tie, and with it, he can move people and objects at will. During his psychic act, it gives him a reach beyond the pins and the whispers in his ear. Offstage, it gives him something more dangerous because he uses that same amulet to pursue Mabel Pines romantically, bending the world toward a want she never agreed to. That is the pattern with Gideon in miniature. A tool built to impress an audience becomes a tool to control a single person he has fixated on. And the line between showmanship and coercion vanishes almost as soon as it is drawn. The episode does not let him keep it. Mabel rejects him plainly, and then she destroys the mystic amulet. And with it, she takes away the source of the power he had been leaning on. Watch how the series frames his exit. He does not accept the defeat quietly. He retreats into the forest, and on his way out, he warns, in his own words, that this is not the last they will see of little ol' him. That single line does a great deal of work. It converts a humiliation into a promise, which is exactly the move a wounded ego makes when it cannot bear to be simply beaten. He has lost the amulet, lost the girl, lost the confrontation, and the only thing he can carry away from the clearing is a threat. The Hand That Rocks the Mabel first aired on the 6th of July, 2012 on Disney Channel, early enough in the run that the audience was still learning who this boy was and how far he would go. It helps to place that early. The series itself had only just arrived. Tourist Trapped, the premiere, first aired on the 15th of June, 2012 on Disney Channel, ahead of the show's official premiere on the 29th of that month. And it reportedly drew a few million viewers, so when Gideon backs into the trees making his promise, the story around him is barely a few weeks old in the wider public eye. His arc and the series are growing up together. The threats he makes in that first summer are notes the writers will collect and pay out much later. And part of what makes his story satisfying is that it is built in the open, one small setback at a time, long before the big fall arrives. And the setbacks are small. That is the texture of Gideon in the middle stretch of Season 1. He is not yet a spectacle of villainy. He is a boy suffering a series of little indignities, most of them earned. In Irrational Treasure, the 8th episode, the humiliation belongs to someone else first. Sheriff Blubbs puts Stan Pines in the stocks, and Stan, pinned in place and unable to do much of anything, mocks Gideon's outfit. It is a petty jab from a man in a public punishment device. Gideon's response is to pelt Stan with tomatoes. There is something almost clarifying about the scene. He has the amulet gone, the psychic mystique untested in this moment, and what remains when you strip the props away is a small figure throwing produce at a man locked in the stocks. The menace deflates into farce, and the show lets it, because it knows exactly how much of his power was theatrical to begin with. The next indignity is quieter and, in its way, sadder. In Bottomless Pit, the 14th episode, Mabel is helping Stan clear out unwanted items by dropping them into the bottomless pit. and among the things she throws away is a stack of love letters that Gideon had written her. Sit with the image for a moment. He wrote them. He kept writing them, apparently enough of them to make a stack after the rejection in the forest, after the amulet was destroyed, after she told him plainly that the answer was no. And the letters do not get read or answered or even mourned. They are simply discarded along with the rest of the junk, dropped into a hole with no bottom. Gideon is not present to see it happen. His devotion is disposed of casually, off-screen from his own point of view, which is somehow more humbling than any direct defeat. The obsession that drives him is, to the people he obsesses over, one more piece of clutter. That is the accumulation the chapter is really about. A destroyed amulet, a face full of tomatoes, a bundle of unanswered letters falling into a pit. None of these is a grand collapse. Each is a chip taken out of the same overinflated self-image, and the writing is patient enough to let them add up rather than staging one enormous downfall out of nowhere. By the time Gideon moves against the Pines family directly, he has already been rejected, disarmed, mocked, and thrown away. The escalation makes sense because the humiliations came first. When the escalation arrives, it comes in the Season 1 finale, Dreamscaperers, which originally aired on the 12th of July, 2013, on Disney Channel, as the first part of the finale. Here, Gideon finally reaches past pranks and personal grudges toward the thing he actually wants, which is the Mystery Shack itself. He breaks into Stan's office to steal the deed to the shack out of Stan's safe. Notice that the plan still depends on physical intrusion, on getting his small hands on a document, and notice too how it goes. He is caught in the act and he is chased out of the building with a broom. A broom. The instrument of his defeat in that moment is a household object swung by a man defending his home. Even at the doorstep of real ambition, the show refuses to grant him dignity. The would-be master schemer is swept out the door like a stray animal. But Dreamscaperers does something the earlier episodes did not, and it is the reason this finale marks a turn rather than just another failure. Locked out of the safe, unable to get the combination by ordinary means, Gideon reaches for a power far larger than a stolen amulet or a hidden camera. He summons the dream demon Bill Cipher, and he strikes a deal with him. The arrangement is to enter Stan's mind and extract the safe's combination from inside his memories, to steal not the paper but the number that guards it. This is the moment the con stops being small. A boy who once fed himself lines through camera pins is now bargaining with something ancient and malicious, trading whatever a demon asks for in exchange for a few digits. And it still fails. The plan collapses because Dipper, Mabel, and Seuss enter Stan's mind first and stop Bill before he can pull the combination free. The pattern holds even as the scale explodes. Gideon reaches higher than ever, aligns himself with a genuine cosmic horror, and is beaten once again by the same three people, working together, defending the same man. The difference is what he has now touched. He has opened a door to Bill Cipher, and a door like that does not close cleanly. The humiliations of the earlier season were survivable because they were ordinary. This one is not, because the ally he called in does not forget the way a thrown letter or a rotten tomato is forgotten. The small con has finally reached for something too large to control, and the reaching is what sets the real fall in motion. There is a version of Gideon Gleeful that the audience meets early, and it is the version he wants them to see. A child in a powder blue suit, a voice like syrup, a tent full of people who believe he can read their minds. What the two-part finale of Season 1 does across Dreamscaperers and Gideon Rises is take that carefully built illusion and dismantle it in public, piece by piece, until nothing is left standing but a small boy in handcuffs that do not quite fit. This chapter is about that dismantling and about the fact that it is his first real comeuppance, the first time the story lets consequence catch up with him. It begins, as many of Gideon's schemes do, with the safe. He breaks into the mystery shack at night to crack Stan's safe, and he is caught in the act by Stan, Dipper, and Mabel. There is no elaborate confrontation here, no monologue. Stan simply drives him off the property by hitting him with a broom. Think about what that image does. A grown man swatting a child out the door with a household cleaning implement is not the stuff of villainy defeated in glory. It is small, almost domestic, and it is meant to be. It is telling you that at this stage, Gideon is a nuisance to be swept away, not yet an enemy to be reckoned with. The broom is an insult, and Gideon knows it. What happens next is where the finale earns its weight. After fleeing, Gideon does not slink home. He watches the shack from outside a window with rage, and then he pulls out Journal 2. He declares that he will unleash the dream demon Bill Cipher because Stan's mind, he says in effect, is not as safe as one might think. That single line reframes the whole safe he could not crack. The safe was never only a box of metal. Stan's mind is the real vault, and Gideon has decided that if the physical lock will not yield, he will break in through the head of the man who owns it. There is a cold escalation in that decision. A moment ago, he was being chased out with a broom. Now he is reaching for a demon. He performs a ritual to summon Bill Cipher, and he strikes a deal. Bill will invade Stan's mind to find the safe combination, and in exchange, Gideon owes Bill an unspecified future favor. Hold on to how casually that bargain is made. The favor is unspecified. Gideon does not know what he has promised, only that he has promised something, to something, in order to open a safe belonging to an old man he despises. The episode does not tell you here what that debt will cost. It simply lets it sit, unpaid and unmeasured, a small dark line of credit opened by a child who thinks he is clever. Everything about the exchange is out of proportion. A mind invaded and a favor owed forever. All of it staked on a combination of numbers. And the episode frames this against exactly the warning the audience needs. Dipper, elsewhere, consults Journal 3 and reads 2 warnings about Bill Cipher. Never summon him under any circumstances. Never let him into your mind. Place those 2 warnings beside what Gideon has just done, and you see the structure of the trap he has walked into. He has summoned him. He is asking to let him into a mind. He is doing, deliberately and with satisfaction, the 2 precise things the journals beg you never to do. Dipper reads the rules on one side of the story. Gideon breaks both of them on the other. The finale does not need to underline this. It lets the 2 moments face each other across the episode and trusts you to notice. That is the first half, Dreamscaperers. And it establishes the shape of Gideon at his most dangerous, reaching past his weight class, borrowing power he does not understand, spending a future he cannot see. When the finale moves into its second half, Gideon rises, the reaching becomes literal and enormous. Believing that Dipper is smuggling Journal 1 out of town, Gideon commandeers a giant robot, a machine built by Old Man McGucket, and he uses it to chase the twins' school bus. Consider the escalation across a single finale, a broom to a safe to a demon to a robot the size of a building. Each step, Gideon grasps for a larger instrument of control, and each step, the instrument is more borrowed and less his own. The robot is not his invention, it is McGucket's. Gideon is always operating machinery he did not build, whether it is a demon's power or an engineer's contraption, or, as we are about to learn, a network of hidden devices. He is a boy at the controls of things too big for him, and the finale keeps making that image plainer until it becomes the whole point. The chase ends the way these confrontations tend to end when the show wants the smaller party to matter. Dipper jumps into the Gideon bot's cockpit and fights Gideon directly, not from a distance, not with a gadget, but face to face inside the machine. Dipper defeats him, and the robot crashes off a bridge and is destroyed. The great borrowed instrument comes apart. The child who commandeered it is left standing in the wreckage in front of a crowd. And here is where Gideon shows you, one last time, the reflex that has kept him safe all season. Immediately after the crash, he lies to the assembled crowd. He tells them that Dipper and Mabel tried to kill him, and he orders the police to arrest the twins instead of him. Watch the speed of it. There is no pause, no calculation you can see. The lie is instant, and it is aimed precisely where his power has always lived, in the crowd's willingness to believe the sweet-faced boy over the outsiders. For most of the season, that reflex has worked. The town loves him, his word moves them. In this moment, he is doing exactly what he has always done, inverting guilt, turning victim into aggressor, and reaching for the machinery of the law the way he reached for the robot and the demon. And for a breath, it looks as though it will work again. The police move to arrest the twins, then Stan intervenes, and the finale delivers the exposure this chapter is built around. Stan reveals that the promotional pins Gideon handed out at his tent of telepathy were not gifts. They were secretly hidden cameras and microphones. This is the mechanism behind the miracle. Every time Gideon seemed to pluck a secret from a stranger's mind, he was reading it off a device that stranger was wearing on their own chest. The psychic powers, the whole foundation of his fame, were surveillance dressed as wonder. The town gave him their trust and pinned his listening devices to their coats, and he sold their own overheard lives back to them as magic. The detail of how Stan uncovered it is the kind of small, grounded touch the show loves. He explains that his hearing aid was picking up audio feedback from the hidden pin microphones. There is no genius stroke here, no elaborate investigation. An old man's hearing aid caught a whine of feedback that should not have been there, and the whole illusion unraveled from that thread. It is fitting that Gideon, who reached for demons and robots, is undone by a piece of ordinary medical equipment worn by the man he most underestimated. The instrument that exposes him is the smallest one in the story. And crucially, this does not happen in a back room. Local news reporter Chandra Jimenez broadcasts the reveal live. She states that local hero Stanford Pines has just exposed Lil Gideon as a fraud. Every element of Gideon's downfall that matters is public. The lie was told to a crowd. The truth is told to a camera. The word fraud is spoken on the air, attached to his name, carried into every home that ever bought a ticket to his tent. Gideon has always understood that his power is a public power, a matter of performance and belief, and so the show destroys it the same way it was built, in front of everyone on a broadcast. There is a symmetry there that is worth sitting with. He lived by the crowd's eyes, he falls under them. The townspeople respond in the only way that could truly wound him. Betrayed, they rip off their Gideon pins and throw them down on camera once they understand the pins had been spying on them. This is the moment the fraud becomes personal for the town. It is one thing to learn a psychic was a fake. It is another to learn that the little charm you wore over your heart was a camera pointed back at your own life. The gesture of tearing off the pins is the crowd taking back the trust they pinned to their chests. Every discarded pin is a person deciding all at once in public that they were fooled and will not be fooled again. Gideon's entire kingdom was built on their belief, and here you watch that belief physically stripped away and dropped on the ground. Then the law he tried to turn against the twins turns instead toward him. Sheriff Blubbs arrests Gideon on the spot, and the charges he cites are conspiracy, fraud, and breaking their hearts. That last phrase is the one that lingers. It is not a legal charge. It is the town speaking through the sheriff, naming the real crime underneath the fraud, which is not the surveillance or the lies about the twins, but the fact that they loved him and he used it. Gideon is led away in undersized handcuffs. The image completes the arc that began with the broom. He was too small to be a proper villain when Stan swept him out the door, and he is too small now for the handcuffs meant for grown criminals. The show never lets him become larger than he is. It arrests the boy in a boy's-sized version of a grown man's shackles, and there is something almost merciful and almost merciless in that at once. What makes this his first real comeuppance rather than just a defeat is that every source of his power is taken from him in the same sequence. The safe stays locked. The demon's bargain is left hanging as a debt he still owes. The robot is destroyed. The lie fails. The psychic act is exposed as machinery. The crowd's love is withdrawn by their own hands, and the law he tried to weaponize closes around him instead. He spent the whole finale reaching for bigger and bigger instruments of control, and one by one, the finale strips them off him until he is standing in handcuffs that are too big to hold anything but a child. It matters, too, where this sits in the life of the show itself. Gideon Rises was the 20th and final episode of Gravity Falls Season 1, written by Alex Hirsch, Matt Chapman, and Michael Rianda, and directed by John Aoshima and Joe Pitt. It originally aired on Disney Channel on August 2nd, 2013, forming the second half of the two-part Season 1 finale, alongside Dreamscaperers. So this is the note the first season chose to end on. Not a monster, not a mystery, but the public unmaking of its most human villain, a boy whose power was belief and whose punishment is to have that belief taken back in front of him. The season closes the book on Gideon the Fraud. What it leaves open is the favor he still owes to something with a single eye, an unpaid debt carried forward past the handcuffs, waiting. There is a particular kind of horror that Gravity Falls reserves for its quietest reveals, and the 7th episode of the second season, the 27th of the series overall, is built almost entirely out of it. It arrived on the 27th of October, 2014, under the title Society of the Blind Eye, directed by Sunil Hall and written by Matt Chapman, Alex Hirsch, and Zach Paez. and it takes a premise the town has been living inside all along and finally names it. Gravity Falls, the episode argues, is not a place where strange things are seen and remembered. It is a place where strange things are seen and then deliberately taken away. The way into that argument is almost mundane. Dipper, Mabel, Zeus, and Wendy find a ruined laptop, and on it a label reading McGucket Labs, and the discovery sends them to the old man himself with a single question. Could he be the author of the journal, the mind behind the research that has organized so much of their summer? Think about the shape of that question for a moment. They are not asking him to solve a mystery, they are asking him to remember who he used to be. And the tragedy the episode slowly uncovers is that he cannot because someone made sure of it, and that someone, it turns out, was him. The mechanism at the center of everything is a device the episode calls the memory gun. Its purpose is simple to state and terrible to consider. It erases specific memories, and the society has been using it for years to wipe the townspeople's recollections of anything supernatural. Every impossible thing anyone in Gravity Falls has ever witnessed, every gnome and ghost and glowing light in the woods, has been quietly followed by a hooded figure and a flash and a clean, blank space where the experience used to be. The town does not disbelieve in the weird because the weird is hidden. The town disbelieves because it has been surgically taught to forget. We watch this happen to lazy Susan, who runs a diner and whose only crime is having seen a group of gnomes try to steal her pie. That is the entire threshold. Not a demon, not a catastrophe, simply a small, absurd encounter with the creatures that live at the edge of the town. And for that she is captured and brought before the society as their intended next victim, another ordinary memory scheduled for deletion. The scale of the thing becomes clear in that moment. If witnessing gnomes and a pie is enough to be taken, then no one in Gravity Falls has ever been allowed to hold on to the truth of where they live for very long. Then comes the choice that gives the episode its strange, sour humor and its deepest unease at the same time. The society ties up its prisoners, and the hooded members reach up and remove their hoods, and they do it for a reason that is almost polite in its cruelty. They're going to erase these memories anyway. There is no need to stay hidden from people who will not remember having seen you. So they show their faces freely, and the faces are the faces of the town. They are not monsters. That is the point the unmasking makes, and it makes it without a single raised voice. Under the hoods are people the audience has spent a season and a half coming to know as background texture. Bud Gleeful, Gideon's father, the used car salesman with the wide grin. The local reporter Toby Determined, a club bouncer named Tats, a farmer called Sprott, and in one of its flatly surreal touches, a man who married a woodpecker, all of them ordinary, all of them led by a figure called Blind Ivan, whose calm authority gives the cult its only real menace. The secret society terrorizing the town is made of the town, and it has been all along, and here the episode does something more interesting than expose a villainous conspiracy, because it stops to ask these people why. Bud Gleeful explains, in effect, that he joined in order to erase his memories of Gideon's tantrums. Toby Determined explains, in effect, that he joined to forget being rejected by the reporter Chandra Jimenez. Sit with how small those reasons are. Not cosmic knowledge, not dangerous secrets, not visions that would break a mind. A difficult son, an unrequited crush, these are the ordinary aches of an ordinary life, and the men carrying them found a machine that could take the ache away. And they used it, and then they kept using it on other people. That is the quiet accusation the whole scene is built to deliver. The memory gun was invented for the extraordinary, for the genuinely unbearable things the woods can do to a person, and it degraded, in human hands, into a tool for avoiding mild discomfort. A man who cannot stand his child's crying reaches for the same device that erases encounters with the impossible. The horror of the society is not that it is powerful. It is that it is petty, that it has taken something meant to protect the mind from what should not be seen and turned it into a way of never having to feel anything unpleasant at all. When the episode lets Bud say his reason out loud, it is not asking you to fear him. It is asking you to recognize him, and that is worse. The unmasking is the shame, and it is a shame that works precisely because these men expected never to be seen. They removed their hoods in perfect confidence that the witnesses would be wiped. And instead, the witnesses are the heroes of the story, and the faces stay exposed. The cult is dismantled not by having its power broken first, but by having its anonymity broken, by being forced to stand in the light as the neighbors and fathers and reporters they always were. A secret society only functions in secret. The moment the town could see who had been editing its memory, the whole apparatus was already finished, whatever fighting came afterward. But the episode saves its real weight for McGucket and for the room it sends him into. Somewhere in the society's headquarters is a hall of memories, tube after tube of erased recollection, and McGucket finds his own tube among them, kept in a place of honor. Think about what that detail means before the plot moves past it. His memories are not stored like the others. They are set apart, elevated, treated with a reverence the rest do not receive. And he does not yet understand why, because the man standing in that hall has no idea that he is looking at his own life arranged like a shrine. He reaches for the tube and removing it triggers an alarm, and the society gives chase. On the surface, this is the episode shifting into its action, the pursuit through the halls, the friends scattered and cornered. Underneath, it is a man being hunted for trying to take back what was taken from him, and the people doing the hunting are the inheritors of an institution he does not remember building. He escapes the chase, and then he does the thing that turns him from a figure of pity into something closer to a hero. He comes back. He returns to rescue his friends rather than run with his recovered memory, and together they defeat the society members and break up the cult for good. And then the recovered memory tells them, and him, the truth that reorganizes the entire episode. Fiddleford McGucket founded the cult himself. He built the memory gun. He created all of it, originally for a reason that carries no cruelty in it at all, to remove unwanted supernatural memories from himself and from others, to give people a mercy from things they could not bear to have seen. The cult that has been erasing the town, the machine that nearly took Lazy Susan's pie and gnomes afternoon, the hooded confidence of Bud Gleeful, all of it grows from the invention of the shambling old man the town writes off as insane. He is not the society's latest victim, he is its origin. The show would fill in the shape of that origin more fully later in an episode well into the season. And it is worth holding that context beside this one carefully because one scene belongs to one episode and the two should not be blurred. McGucket, that later material establishes, was the author's engineering assistant, the man who worked beside Stanford Pines on the trans-dimensional portal, and he quit. He quit because of what he saw while linked to that portal, visions of Bill Cipher, including the image of Bill removing his bow tie, his exoskeleton, in order to feed. Whatever the channel has said before about Ford and the pull of that machine, the lens here is not Ford's ambition. It is the assistant who looked into the same abyss and understood correctly that he needed to walk away from it. Walking away did not save him. This episode is plain about the cost. After quitting the Portal project, McGucket was consumed by paranoia and by insomnia, worn down by encounters he could not stop reliving, and so he did the only thing his own genius offered. He turned the memory gun on himself, not once, repeatedly. Every time the fear became too much, he erased another piece of himself to make it stop, and each erasure took a little more of the man with it, until the repeated self-wiping had hollowed him into the figure the town knows and mocks, the crazy old man in the woods. That is the quiet devastation underneath the Hall of Memories, and it is why his tube sits in a place of honor. He was the founder. The society kept its creator's mind enshrined even as its members used his device to duck their own small unhappinesses. And the man himself walked past his own shrine without recognition, a stranger to the life he had deliberately deleted. When he finally holds that tube, he is not just recovering a fact. He is recovering the reason he became what he became, the whole chain that runs from a vision of a hungry triangle to a mind taken apart by its own owner, one careful piece at a time. So the dismantling of this cult is a stranger, sadder event than a simple victory over hooded villains. Yes, the society is exposed, its members unmasked and shamed, its machine stopped, its hold on the town's memory broken. But the same episode that shames Bud Gleeful and Toby, determined for using the memory gun to escape their trivial pains, also shows you the man who built it, using it to escape genuine portal-sized terror, and being destroyed by that escape all the same. The lesson the town's neighbors failed to learn, that you cannot cut the unwanted parts out of a life without cutting the life itself, is written most clearly in the ruined mind of the person who invented the knife. What the children give McGucket in the end is not comfort. It is the opposite of the mercy he designed his whole machine to provide. They help him remember. They stand with the founder of the society against the society, and they hand him back the very memories he spent years teaching himself to lose. Paranoia and Bill Cipher and the portal and all. It is a strange gift to call a kindness, and the episode knows it. Sometimes the cruelty is the forgetting, and the shame, when it finally comes, is only the light switching on in a room full of people who thought they would never be seen. Some villains do not stop when they are defeated, and Gideon Gleeful belongs to that category. To understand the schemes he runs from a jail cell, you have to first understand how he ended up in that cell, because the arrest is not the end of his ambition. It is only the moment his ambition changes address. Go back to the closing of the first season, to the episode called Gideon Rises. Gideon has already taken from Stan the one thing that matters most, the deed to the mystery shack. He does not win it in a fight. He tricks Stan out of it, which is worth pausing on, because the trick is the whole character. And once the paper is his, he does not simply move in. He unveils a plan to tear the shack down entirely and raise in its place an amusement park built around himself, a place he calls Gideonland. Think about the scale of that vanity. A child does not want the building. He wants the building replaced by a monument to his own face. To carry it out, he needs power beyond his size, and he finds it in Old Man McGucket, who builds him a giant robot. The Gideon bot is the machine that lets a small boy tower over the town, and Gideon climbs inside it and pilots it against Dipper and Mabel. This is the heist made literal, a stolen home defended by a stolen body of steel. Other tellings of this show like to linger on the spectacle of the fight, the way a cartoon suddenly becomes a monster movie. I want to point instead at the sadness underneath the metal. Gideon cannot do any of this himself. Every piece of his rise is borrowed. The deed by deception, the robot by another man's genius, and a thing that is entirely borrowed can be entirely taken back. The robot falls the way borrowed things fall. Dipper does not defeat the machine from outside. He fights his way into it, forcing the confrontation with Gideon to happen face to face rather than at the distance the robot was built to keep. That intrusion is what brings the whole thing down. The Gideon bot topples and explodes, and the smaller truth inside the larger shell is finally exposed. A boy who was never as big as the machine made him look. Then Stan finishes it, and he finishes it with evidence rather than force. The promotional pins Gideon had handed out at the height of his takeover, the little tokens of adoration pressed into every fan's palm, were hidden video cameras. Stan reveals this to the crowd, and the crowd that had loved Gideon turns against him in the space of that revelation. Consider how cruel and how fitting that is. Gideon's power was always built on surveillance dressed as affection, on knowing everyone's secrets while smiling. Stan simply shows the town the machinery of that smile. The pins that were meant to gather the crowd's private lives have become the proof that ends his public one. Gideon is arrested on charges the episode names as conspiracy, fraud, and breaking their hearts. That last phrase is not a real legal charge, and the show knows it is not, which is precisely why it matters. It tells you that his true crime in the moral logic of this town was emotional. He weaponized love. And Stan, in the same motion, reclaims the deed, so the home returns to the hands it was tricked out of. The season closes with order restored and a boy behind bars, and you could be forgiven for thinking that is where Gideon's story rests. It is not, and the Season 2 premiere tells you so. Scary OK opens with the Pines family throwing a party they explicitly call Mystery Shack is Back, a celebration staged for one reason: to get back to normal after the whole Lil Gideon incident. That framing is telling. Normal is something they have to declare, something they have to throw a party to insist upon, which means Gideon left a mark that a locked door did not erase. And the party, of course, does not stay calm. It is crashed by unwelcome guests, and the attempt to return to ordinary life is interrupted almost as soon as it begins. Inside that same episode, the writers give Gideon a single brief cameo, and it is a small masterpiece of placement. We see him inside his jail cell, and what he is reacting to is light, the light thrown off by Stan's underground machine. He does not speak a scheme here. He simply notices. A boy in a cell catching a glow from something buried beneath the town he lost, and the camera lets you feel the gears begin to turn again behind his eyes. It is the show promising you that confinement has not cured him. It has only slowed him down and given him time to watch. Now, the temptation with a character like this is to imagine him lurking behind every subsequent event. And I want to resist that on your behalf because it would be false. Look at the Golf War, the third episode of the season. There is no Gideon in it at all. Its story is a mini golf rivalry between Mabel and Pacifica Northwest, complicated by tiny living golf ball creatures called Lilliputians. I raise this precisely because it is empty of him. The show does not let Gideon become a shadow over everything. He is a scheme that surfaces at chosen moments, and between those moments the town simply lives, plays mini-golf, quarrels over ordinary rivalries. His absence from an episode is part of how it keeps his presence meaningful when it returns. And it does return, in a form that is far more patient than a giant robot. In The Stanchurian Candidate, well into the second season, Gideon is still in prison and he is running a campaign. His father, Bud Gleeful, is running for mayor, and Gideon acts as Bud's campaign manager from inside his cell. The scheme is elegant in the way the robot never was. If Bud wins, Bud can pardon his son and set him free. Sit with the difference between the two plots. In the first season, Gideon tried to seize the town with borrowed steel, and the steel broke. Here, he tries to seize the mechanism of the town itself, the office that holds the power to open his cell from the outside, and he does it not by force but by proxy, whispering strategy through his father. This is the same boy, but it is a smarter version of him, or at least a chastened one. The heist of Season 1 was loud, physical, and immediate, a stolen deed and a stolen robot, in a single afternoon. The jailhouse plot is quiet and structural. He no longer tries to tower over the town. He tries to legislate his way out of the cage, to convert an election into a pardon, to make the law itself the tool that frees him. And there is a grim consistency to it. Gideon's gift was always for turning other people into instruments, the town into an audience, McGucket into an engineer, his fans into cameras, and now his own father into a candidate whose victory would be, in effect, his son's release. Both schemes share the flaw that defines him, and it is the flaw worth ending on. Gideon cannot free himself with his own hands. The robot needed a builder. The pardon needs a winning father. Every plan he runs depends on someone else carrying the weight, and that dependence is the crack that runs through all of them. The Gideon bot fell because a boy who cannot fight sat inside a machine that could, and the moment Dipper reached the boy, the machine was finished. The mayoral scheme rests on the same fragility, a freedom that only arrives if another person delivers it. So the arc across these episodes is not really about a villain who keeps escaping. It is about a villain who keeps discovering, in slower and quieter ways, that borrowed power comes back to the lender. He loses the shack because the deed was taken by trickery and can be reclaimed. He loses the robot because it was never his body. And even from the cell, plotting a pardon through his father, he is doing the only thing he has ever known how to do, which is to reach for a power he cannot hold alone, and to wait, in the glow of a machine buried under the town, for someone else to lift him out. During a practice dinner the night before their annual party, the objects inside Northwest Manor begin to lift into the air and turn against the family. Forks, plates, whatever is nearest, all of it rises and moves with intent. And Preston, Priscilla, and Pacifica Northwest are driven under their own dining table for cover. Consider the image before we do anything else with it. This is one of the wealthiest families in Gravity Falls, a household defined by control and by the appearance of control. And the first thing the episode does is force all three of them onto the floor beneath the furniture, crouched together, exposed. The haunting has not yet been explained. What has been established is a picture. The people who spend every waking moment arranging how they will be seen have been reduced to hiding. And the house they built their name upon has decided it is done cooperating. Preston's response to this is worth sitting with because it tells you exactly how his mind works. He does not pray, he does not flee, he does not gather the family and leave. He recruits. Having seen a newspaper photograph of Dipper Pines fighting a giant bat with a police taser, Preston decides that this boy is a tool that can solve the family's ghost problem. That is the register in which the Northwests think. A problem has appeared, and somewhere out there is a person who can be acquired to make it go away. The supernatural, for Preston, is not a mystery or a horror. It is an inconvenience to be outsourced before the guests arrive. The acquiring, though, does not go the way he would expect because it is not Preston who does it. It is Pacifica. She comes to the mystery shack herself and asks Dipper for help, and Dipper refuses. He refuses because of who she has been. Her past cruelty, her open disdain for the Pines family, all of it is still fresh, and he has no reason to spend himself on her behalf. This is a small moment and an honest one. It does not pretend that a single request erases everything that came before it. Dipper says no, and the no is earned, and for a moment the whole arrangement collapses on the doorstep. What changes his mind is not Pacifica. It is Mabel. She talks him into helping, and her reason is entirely her own. If Dipper solves the Northwest's problem, then she and her friends Candy and Grenda can attend the Northwest party, which the three of them describe as their dream. Think about the distance between the two motives sitting in that room. Preston wants the boy with the taser because a ghost is throwing his silverware. Mabel wants Dipper to say yes because the party behind those gates is the most glamorous thing she can imagine, a place she has been taught to want and has never been allowed inside. The same event, the annual Northwest Party, means opposite things depending on which side of the wall you were born on. To the family, it is a burden and a target. To the girls in the town, it is a dream. Dipper agrees, but he agrees on a condition, and the condition is telling. He will help only if Pacifica gives him 3 invitations to the party. She reluctantly hands them over. Notice what has happened here. The currency of the Northwest world, the invitation, the thing that decides who is worthy and who is not, has just been traded to a boy from the Mystery Shack in exchange for labor. Pacifica does not want to give them up. She does it because she has no other option, and in giving them up, she has already begun, without knowing it, to spend the family's most guarded resource on the very people it was designed to exclude. Meanwhile, Mabel, Candy, and Grenda set about making their own party dresses with a glue gun before they go. There is something pointed in that detail. They are not entitled to the finery, so they build a rough version of it themselves, and they are delighted to do it. And they will walk through those famous gates in clothing held together with hot glue. Inside the manor, Pacifica and Dipper find something the family never meant anyone to see. Behind a painting, there is a hidden room, and inside that room is a gallery of portraits. Each one depicts a Northwest ancestor in the act of committing some misdeed. Pacifica describes it herself, and her words are the sharpest line in the chapter. She calls it a painted record of every horrible thing her family has ever done. Hold on to that phrase because it reframes everything about how these people understand themselves. The Northwests did not forget their crimes. They did not lose the memory or bury it out of shame. They commissioned it. They paid artists to render each cruelty in oil and then hung the results in a private room where only the family would ever look. The wealth in that house is not innocent of its history. It is decorated with it. The misdeeds are trophies as much as secrets, kept close, kept hidden, and kept. And then the episode names the specific crime under all the others. The haunting is the work of a ghost, and the ghost is a lumberjack named Archibald Corduroy, an ancestor of Wendy Corduroy. He helped build Northwest Manor. He did the work of raising the very walls the family now hides behind. And he did it because he was promised something in return. He was promised a place at the family's annual party. That is the whole of it. Not a fortune, not a title. A place at the table, the same party the town girls dream of, the same party Preston is so desperate to protect from a ghost. Archibald built the house on the strength of that single promise. After the mansion was finished, the Northwests broke it. When the party came, they locked the lumberjacks and the townspeople outside. The men who built the manor stood on the wrong side of the doors they had hung, shut out of the celebration they had been assured they would join. And Archibald, dead and wronged, cursed the family to return generations later. This is the shape of the whole story, and it is a clean one. The floating silverware, the practice dinner ruined, the family driven under the table. None of it is random malice. It is a debt. The house is haunted by a broken promise, and the promise was about who is allowed inside and who is kept out. Everything the Northwests are, their gates, their invitations, their private party, their painted gallery of misdeeds, all of it grows from the same root. They built their standing by deciding who counts, and the first person they cheated was the man who built their walls. At the climax, the ghost stops asking and starts acting. He turns the party guests to wood, Dipper among them, and he refuses to lift the curse under any condition but one. A Northwest must open the manor gates to the public. The family must honor the promise it broke. There is a terrible symmetry in the demand. The Northwest turned people away from the doors, and now the ghost is turning people into the very material Archibald once cut and hauled, into lumber, into the substance of the house itself. The curse does not ask for money or apology. It asks for the gates to open, which is the one thing the entire Northwest identity is built to prevent. And here the episode places its weight on Pacifica. Her father is present, and Preston is exactly who he has been all along, unwilling to surrender the boundary that makes the family what it is. Pacifica defies him. She opens the manor's gates herself, and the ordinary townsfolk of Gravity Falls flood into the private, high society party that was never meant for them. Watch what that act costs and what it undoes at the same time. She's a child raised inside this house, taught from birth that the wall is the point, that the exclusion is the prestige. To open the gates, she has to reject not just her father in the moment, but the entire logic she was assembled from. The town pours in, the glue gun dresses and the taser and all, into the room the Northwest spent generations keeping pure. The ghost keeps his word. Once the gates are open, once the broken promise has finally been honored by a Northwest willing to honor it, he lifts the wood curse. His parting line is the one the episode gives us verbatim, and it is worth quoting because it names the whole machine in 3 words. He tells Pacifica, "I feel lumber justice. The haunting ends there." Archibald is at peace, not because the family apologized, not because they were punished in any lasting way, but because for one evening the door that had been shut in his descendants' faces was thrown open. The debt is paid in the only currency it was ever denominated in, which is access. What remains is Preston and Priscilla standing in their own manor, forced to share their elite party with the townspeople they had shut out. That is where the episode leaves the parents, not humbled by choice, not moved by conscience, but overruled. The classism that organizes their whole existence has been exposed in front of the very high society they perform for. The family's buried secret dragged out of its hidden room and into the light of the party. And the person who exposed it was their own daughter. Preston does not get to outsource this the way he outsourced the ghost. There is no boy with a taser who can put the town back outside the gates once they have flooded in. I think the quiet cruelty of the ending and its quiet mercy both belong to Pacifica. The story does not pretend she has become a different person, only that she made one choice her parents never would have, and that the choice was enough. The Northwest spent generations keeping a record of their misdeeds where no one could see it. Their child took the oldest of those misdeeds and undid it in public, in front of everyone whose opinion the family lives for. Northwest Mansion Mystery is, by most episode guides, the 10th entry in Season 2 of Gravity Falls, and it premiered on Disney XD sometime during that stretch of the show's run. It is, underneath the ghost and the floating forks, a story about a promise, about who a family decides is worthy of standing inside its house, and about a girl who opened a gate her ancestors sealed and let. The town she was taught to look down on walked through it. A certain kind of failure happens when a schemer builds his plan on top of a system he has never bothered to understand. And the story of Bud Gleeful's mayoral campaign is one of the cleanest examples it ever produced. In The Stanchurian Candidate, the 14th installment of Season 2, the old mayor of Gravity Falls dies, and the town needs a new one. Bud Gleeful, the used car salesman with the wide smile and the wider reach, throws his name in. He runs against Stan Pines, and on the surface, it looks like an ordinary contest between 2 men who talk fast for a living, which is exactly what the episode wants you to think before it pulls the floor away. Because Bud is not really running. Gideon is. From inside his prison cell, the boy who once tried to take the Mystery Shack by force is running his father's campaign in secret, pulling the strings of a man who does not know he is a puppet. Measure the sheer will behind it. Gideon has lost his freedom, lost his direct power, lost nearly everything a 9-year-old villain can lose. And he responds not by giving up, but by reaching outward through the only person who still visits him. The plan is elegant in the way that all of Gideon's plans are elegant, which is to say, it looks airtight until you press on it. Bud wins the mayorship. Bud, as mayor, pardons his son. Gideon walks free, and the whole town that rejected him becomes his again. The method matters here, and the episode is specific about it. Gideon does not simply advise his father or feed him talking points. He possesses him. He uses a one-time possession spell torn from a page of Journal 2, a single use with no second chance, and he steps inside Bud Gleeful and drives. This is the moment Gideon stops being a manipulator and becomes something closer to a parasite. A manipulator persuades, a possessor overrides. And the spell being one-time, single-use, torn from the page, tells you how much Gideon is willing to spend on this. He has one shot inside his father's body, and he is betting his freedom on it. Meanwhile, on the other side of the race, a mirror image is quietly forming, and the episode is clever enough to let you notice the symmetry before it says a word about it. Ford gives Dipper a pair of mind control ties. Dipper and Mabel, wanting to help Stan win but knowing Stan cannot help being Stan on a stage, trick their great uncle into wearing one by telling him it is his lucky tie. So while Gideon controls Bud from the inside, the twins control Stan from a distance, feeding him lines, steering his gestures, turning a loud and unpredictable old man into a candidate. 2 campaigns, 2 puppets, 2 sets of hidden hands. The episode does not underline this. It simply builds both machines and lets them run side by side. And if you are watching closely, you understand that the difference between the heroes and the villain in this story is not the method, it is the limit. That limit arrives on the final day of the election. Stan refuses to put the tie back on. He has felt himself being moved and he does not like it, and he plants his feet. And here Dipper, frustrated, angry, certain that he knows better, tells Stan the truth, that he and Mabel had been controlling him throughout the campaign. It lands the way that kind of confession always lands. Stan storms out of Greasy's diner. The hero's machine breaks, and it breaks because Dipper crossed a line and got caught, and because Stan is a person and not a puppet, and will not be told otherwise. That is the crucial thing the episode is quietly arguing. The good version of the plan collapses the moment the person inside it says no. Gideon's version has no such release valve because Bud cannot say no. Bud does not know he is in there. Mabel is the one who sees it. She notices that the possessed Bud Gleeful is acting uncharacteristically calculating and aggressive, and she realizes he is being controlled by someone else. This is a lovely piece of writing because it uses the twins' own guilt as the instrument of detection. They have just spent an entire campaign steering a person, so they know what a steered person looks like from the outside. Mabel recognizes the tells because she helped author them on Stan. The show lets the sin become the sight. She looks at Bud, sees a man being driven, and understands that somewhere there is a driver. The driver, of course, does what cornered Gideon always does, which is escalate past all proportion. Controlling Bud, he captures Dipper and Mabel and traps them inside a giant eagle statue rigged with explosives, intending to detonate it after he wins the election. Consider the shape of that intention for a moment. He does not need to kill the twins to win. The plan was always the mayorship and the pardon. But Gideon cannot separate the strategic from the personal, and the twins are personal. And so the plan grows a second head that has nothing to do with victory and everything to do with hatred. It is the same flaw that has undone him before, dressed in new clothes. He builds a machine to get what he wants and then bolts a revenge onto it, and the revenge is what exposes the machine. The climax stages all of this at the eagle statue during the final debate, and it turns on a sound. Stan, still furious, still done with his family, hears the twins screaming, and he abandons the debate. He does not weigh it. He does not calculate whether leaving the stage costs him the election. He climbs the scaffolding to rescue Dipper and Mabel before the explosives detonate, and in doing so, he throws away the very thing the whole episode has been about him wanting. This is the answer to the question the episode has been asking since the first scene. What is the difference between Stan and Gideon, between the puppet who was steered for love and the puppet who was possessed for freedom? The difference is that when it counted, the man walked away from power to save 2 children, and the boy tried to blow 2 children up to keep it. And then the town, in its own strange way, agrees with him. Gravity Falls decides its mayoral election by a method so absurd that it functions almost as a joke about democracy itself, which is to say the winner is whichever candidate a live eagle chooses to land on, and the eagle lands on whoever is covered in the most birdseed. The townspeople, having watched Stan climb a burning statue to save his family, reward him by covering him in birdseed. The eagle lands. Stan wins apparently with 95% of the vote. For one clean beat, it looks as though the good version of the story is going to be allowed to close the way good stories are supposed to close, with the decent act rewarded and the decent man raised up. The finale does not allow it, and the way it refuses is the sharpest joke in the episode. Stan wins the popular vote and is immediately disqualified because his criminal record is too extensive for him to hold the office. The mayorship does not go to the runner-up in any meaningful sense. It defaults to Tyler Cutebiker, a townsperson whose entire qualification is that he was the only candidate who correctly filed his paperwork. The election, which the whole town treated as a contest of eagles and birdseed and screaming rescues, is decided in the end by a form, by bureaucracy, by the one boring rule nobody was watching. Which means that Gideon's grand design does not fail because it was outfought. It fails because it was aimed at a target that was never really there. Bud is exposed as having been mind-controlled, and Stan is disqualified, and the mayorship lands on a man who filed his forms on time, and there is simply no version of this outcome in which Gideon gets his pardon. The scheme fails completely. He spent his one-time spell, drove his father into ruin, tried to murder 2 children, and gained nothing, and he is left exactly where he started, in prison. The system he tried to hijack turned out to run on a rule he never thought to read. That is the quiet cruelty of the episode. It defeats him not with a hero, but with paperwork. And this is the moment the show chooses to change what Gideon is. In the final scene, alone in his cell, he peels a cat poster off the wall to reveal a hidden Bill Cipher summoning symbol drawn underneath. And he completes the drawing, and he says, in effect, that he is ready to make a deal with Bill Cipher. Every con up to this point has been Gideon's own, powered by amulets and journals and stolen spells, and every one of them has ended like this one, with the boy behind bars and the town intact. So he stops trying to be the schemer. He goes looking for a partner who is bigger than he is, and the only thing bigger in this town is the triangle. This is the last real con of Gideon Gleeful as a solo act, and its true consequence is not that it failed. It is that failing this time made him reach for the one hand in Gravity Falls that no one should ever take. Consider what it means for a show to introduce its first villain not as a shadow at the edge of the woods, but as a boy. In Tourist Trap, the very first episode of Gravity Falls, written by series creator Alex Hirsch and directed by John Aoshima, the threat that Mabel Pines faces arrives wearing the shape of a suitor. His name is Norman, and he has been courting her. He is polite in the awkward way of a teenage boy, and Mabel, who wants very much to be wanted, gives him the benefit of every doubt. Then the trench coat opens, and Norman turns out to be a stack of forest gnomes standing on one another's shoulders, held together by nothing but the fabric and the wish to be believed. There is something quietly instructive in that reveal, and it is worth sitting with before the chapter moves on. The gnomes did not attack. They courted. They understood that the fastest way past a person's defenses is not force but affection, and they built an entire false person out of themselves to deliver it. When you strip the fantasy away, the mechanism underneath is almost uncomfortably ordinary. A young girl is told she is loved by someone who's only pretending to be a someone at all. The show plays it for comedy, and the comedy holds, but the bones of the scene are the bones of a warning. The leader of the gnomes is named Jeff, and Jeff does not take rejection gracefully. He proposes marriage to Mabel, and when she refuses him, the courtship drops its mask entirely. The gnomes kidnap her. They intend to make her their queen, which is the polite fantasy language for taking a person who has said no and keeping her anyway. The escalation is swift, and the episode does not linger to explain it. One moment Jeff is asking, and the next the asking has become a demand backed by force, which is how that particular kind of entitlement has always tended to move. To chase down Dipper and Mabel as they flee, the gnomes do the thing that separates them from ordinary woodland nuisances. They merge. Their small bodies climb and lock and fuse into a single giant gnome monster, a tower of red hats and reaching hands that lumbers after the twins with far more menace than any one of them could manage alone. This is the idea the episode is really built around, and it is a clever one for a first outing. The gnomes are only dangerous together. Their strength is entirely a function of their willingness to stop being individuals and become a mass. Alone, Jeff is a small creature making a proposal no one is obligated to accept. Combined, he and his kind are a thing that can knock down trees. The way Mabel defeats him matters because it inverts the trick that was played on her. Jeff built a false courtship to trap her, so Mabel builds a false surrender to trap him. She pretends to agree to the marriage, she lets him place a ring on her finger, and she lets him lean in for the kiss. And in the instant that his guard is fully down, in the instant when he believes he has won, she brings up a leaf blower and sucks him into it. Then she blasts him back out. Think about the economy of that. The gnome who weaponized affection is undone the moment he trusts an affection that was never real, and the girl he underestimated is the one holding the machine. The physics of the finish are satisfying in the plain, mechanical way that good slapstick is satisfying. Jeff, fired out of the leaf blower like a cork, crashes directly into the giant gnome monster that his own kind assembled. Their combined body, the whole point of their power, becomes the surface he collides with. And then Mabel turns the leaf blower on the rest of them and simply blows the gnomes away, scattering the tower back into the loose pieces it was made of, forcing them to retreat into the forest they came from. The monster that took so many of them to build comes apart under a garden tool. There is a lesson buried in that image about how quickly a threat that depends entirely on staying merged falls apart the moment something breaks its shape. It is easy, watching now, to forget how much was riding on this small half-hour of television. Tourist Trap did not premiere in the ordinary way. It aired first as a sneak peek on Disney Channel on the 15th of June 2012, slotted in immediately after the television movie Let It Shine, roughly 2 weeks before the show's official series premiere on the 29th of June. That sneak peek was watched by close to 3.4 million viewers, so the gnomes, of all things, carried the first impression. The first villain most of that audience ever met in Gravity Falls was a stack of small creatures in a coat, and the first hero moment they ever saw was a girl with a leaf blower refusing to be made into a queen. For a series that would eventually reach toward genuine cosmic dread, it began with a joke that had a spine. That balance, the joke with a spine, is the through line to the other creature this chapter is concerned with, and it lives in the 12th episode of the first season, Summerween. Here the monster is not a false suitor but a false shape of another kind, a thing assembled out of the town's own leftovers. The Summerween Trickster is made from loser candy, the candy that no trick-or-treater ever wanted, the sweets that got picked over and rejected and finally dumped in the town junkyard. He is, quite literally, a creature built from the discarded. Everything about him is the stuff people decided was not good enough, gathered up and given a will. His demand is blunt. He threatens to eat Dipper, Mabel, Grenda, and Candy unless they bring him 500 pieces of candy before the last jack-o'-melon burns out. The jack-o'-melon, the town's own melon-carved answer to the pumpkin, functions here as an hourglass. Its flame is the clock, and the children's task is to feed the very appetite that is threatening them, which is a strange and slightly cruel bind when you look at it directly. Bring the monster made of unwanted candy more candy, or become food yourselves. The episode dresses this in holiday color, but the shape of the threat is a ransom, and the currency is the exact thing the creature is made of. The defeat, when it comes, belongs to Seuss, and it arrives in stages that keep refusing to be final. Seuss climbs inside the trickster and eats his way out from within, which is a grotesque and very funny reversal of the monster's own threat to eat them. The creature that wanted to consume the children is consumed instead from the inside by the gentlest member of the group. Then the others finish the job with a pickup truck, smashing the remaining pieces apart across the ground. By every convention of these stories, that should be the end. The monster is broken into fragments and scattered, except it is not the end, and this is the detail that lifts the Summerween Trickster above an ordinary monster of the week. The smashed pieces reassemble. They pull themselves back together into an even more malformed, even more hideous version of the creature, worse than what it was before. Something in that refusal to stay dead touches the same nerve as the gnome tower, but from a darker angle. The gnomes merged out of strategy and came apart cleanly. The trickster reassembles out of something closer to compulsion, and each reassembly leaves him uglier, more wrong, less able to hold a coherent form. He is a thing that cannot stop trying to exist even as existing makes him more monstrous, which is what makes his actual final defeat so unlike anything else in these early episodes. Soos does not smash him again. Soos tells him the truth. He tells the trickster that the loser candy, the rejected candy, the candy no one wanted, tasted good. And the monster made entirely of being unwanted cannot survive being wanted. He cries candy corn tears of joy. And in that softened, grateful moment, Soos eats him completely. Consider how strange and how kind that ending is. Every weapon that failed against the trickster failed because it treated him as a thing to be destroyed. The one thing that finally undoes him is being told that the discarded part of him had value all along. Set the two creatures beside each other and a quiet symmetry appears. Though the episodes never state it, both villains are, at bottom, about wanting and being wanted. Jeff builds a false person to be wanted and is destroyed by a false wanting turned back on him. The trickster is built out of being unwanted and is dissolved the moment he is told honestly that he was good. The gnomes lose because their power depended on merging and something broke their shape. The trickster keeps reforming his shape and loses anyway because his real weakness was never structural. It was emotional. One monster is undone by physics and a leaf blower. The other is undone by a sentence. There's a reason these single episode creatures land so cleanly, and it has to do with the modesty of their scale. Neither the gnomes nor the trickster is meant to haunt the series. They arrive, they threaten, they are met with exactly the right kind of resourcefulness, and they are gone by the closing minutes, sent back into the forest or eaten whole. The comeuppance is complete and it is contained. You do not carry these villains as dread into the next episode the way you might carry a figure who escapes or lingers. They exist to be resolved, and the resolution is the pleasure. That is a different pleasure from the long, unresolved menace the series would later build. And it is worth naming as its own thing, because a series that only ever did slow-burning threat would be exhausting. And a series that only ever did tidy Monster of the Week resolutions would be forgettable. Gravity Falls, in its first season, was learning to do both. What stays with me about these two is how much character the show manages to fit into creatures who last a single episode. Jeff proposes and kidnaps and merges and crashes, and in that short arc he is fully himself. A small, entitled thing that mistook a girl's kindness for consent. The trickster demands and threatens and reassembles and finally weeps with joy, and in his short arc he is fully himself too. A pile of rejected sweetness that only ever wanted to be told it was enough. They get what they deserve, both of them, and the getting is swift. But the show is careful, even this early, to make sure that what they deserve fits precisely who they turned out to be. There is a moment in the 4th episode of Season 2 of Gravity Falls, an episode called Sock Opera, that the writers treat almost as a comic aside, and that turns out to be something much heavier. It first aired on Disney XD on the 8th of September 2014, the 24th episode of the series overall, and it is the episode where the show's central villain finally stops being an abstraction. Up to this point, Bill Cipher has been a thing seen in dreams, a triangle in a nightmare, a voice that arrives when the mind is unguarded and leaves no fingerprints in the waking world. In Sock Opera, he steps out of the dream and into a body, and the body he chooses is Dipper's. Consider how it happens, because the mechanics matter. Dipper has been trying to unlock a laptop, and the password is the thing standing between him and answers. Bill offers a deal. He offers the one thing Dipper wants, and Dipper, worn down and desperate, agrees to it and shakes on it. That handshake is the entire trap. The implication all along had been that Bill wanted to possess a puppet, one of the sock puppets from Mabel's show, something small and harmless. Instead, the instant the deal is sealed, Bill reaches in and pulls Dipper's soul clean out of his body and climbs into the body himself. It is a bait and switch performed on a child who believed he was being clever. The lesson underneath is easy to miss. The danger of Bill was never his power in the abstract. It was that he reads exactly what you want and sells it back to you at a price you do not understand until the transaction is already complete. What Bill does first, once he is wearing Dipper, tells you everything about the kind of creature he is. He does not gloat at length. He does not explain his plan. He walks over to the laptop, the object the entire group has been laboring to unlock, the thing Dipper traded his own body to reach, and he steps on it. He destroys it. The prize that motivated the whole deal is annihilated in the first seconds of his ownership of the body, casually, as though it were never the point. And of course it was never the point. The laptop was bait too. Everything Bill offers is bait, and the reveal here is that he does not even value the thing he dangled. He wanted the body, he got the body. The laptop was a means, and now it is garbage under a borrowed shoe. Then comes the strangest and most revealing sequence, the one that lingers. Bill, newly installed in a physical form, begins to slap his own face. He does it again and again, marveling at the sensation, and he declares that pain is hilarious. Sit with that for a moment. Here is a being that has existed as pure mind, as geometry, as something that lives in the space between sleeping and waking. And the first thing he does with a nervous system is hurt it for the joy of feeling anything at all. To Bill, pain is not suffering, pain is novelty, it is entertainment. A body is a toy he has never been allowed to play with, and he treats Dipper's body with the reckless delight of someone who will not be the one paying the bill for the bruises. There is something genuinely unsettling in the cheerfulness of it, a cruelty that does not even register itself as cruelty because the creature feels no stake in the flesh he is wearing. The same disregard for other people surfaces again during the show. Mabel's sock puppet rock opera is underway, and Bill, still in Dipper's body, takes a seat next to Seuss in the audience. He turns to him and offers to tell him the exact time and date of his death. And Seuss, being Seuss, happily says yes. It is played as a joke and it lands as one, but underneath it is the same principle. Bill exists outside of time as the people around him experience it. Death, for him, is a coordinate on a map he can already read. He offers this knowledge the way you might offer someone the time of day without any sense that it is a terrible thing to know, because to him mortality is simply information, and the fear that surrounds it is another human quirk he finds amusing. The real confrontation is between Bill and Mabel, and it is worth paying attention to why. Bill threatens to drop a giant prop wedding cake onto the stage to ruin her show and endanger the crowd unless she hands over Journal 3. This is the thing he actually came for, the journal, the accumulated research that is dangerous in his hands. And he tries to break her the way he breaks everyone, by finding the pressure point and pressing. He taunts her. He asks, who would sacrifice everything they have worked for just for their dumb sibling? He means it as the argument that ends the argument. He is certain that no one would trade their own dream for a brother. Mabel answers him plainly. She says, Dipper would. And she yanks the journal back out of his hands. That exchange is the emotional hinge of the whole episode. Bill has spent the episode treating a person as an object, a body to inhabit and abuse, and Mabel answers him with the one thing his logic cannot account for, which is that people give things up for each other, that the bond between the twins is precisely the value he cannot see and cannot buy. And here is the part that deserves attention, because it corrects a story that is easy to misremember. It is tempting to think that Bill's first real physical defeat comes at the hands of an adult, that Grunkle Stan sees his great-nephew possessed by a demon and steps in to protect the family. That is not what happens in sock opera. Stan is in the crowd. He watches the struggle on stage between Mabel and the possessed Dipper, and he does not intervene at all. He does not recognize anything supernatural in it. What he sees is two children fighting, and his instinct is to pull out a camera. He says, in effect, that children fighting is something he can sell, and he starts filming. It is a small, funny, deeply characteristic moment, and it means that no adult saves the day here. The person who has to defeat Bill is Mabel, alone, with no power of her own and no help coming. She wins, and she wins without a single blow. This is what makes the defeat remarkable. Mabel does not fight Bill on his terms. She notices the one weakness he cannot fix. Dipper had been awake for a full day, 24 hours, chasing that password, and the body Bill is wearing is exhausted whether Bill acknowledges it or not. Bill has all the arrogance of a being that treats pain as a joke, but he is running a body that is close to collapse and covered in mosquito bites. So Mabel tickles him. She exploits the fatigue and the itching and the sheer physical limit of a boy who has not slept. And she keeps at it until the possessed body simply gives out and collapses from exhaustion, and Bill is forced out of it. Think about the shape of that victory. The creature who mocked pain, who slapped his own face for fun, is undone by the body's own tiredness, by the ordinary biological fact that flesh needs rest. He treated the body as a toy with no consequences, and the consequences of never resting it are exactly what expel him. Mabel ends the disastrous show by hitting the stage's big finish button, and the pyrotechnics go off, and the audience boos and files out, complaining that they almost died. It is a catastrophe by every measure of a theater production, and a total success by the only measure that matters that night. Her brother is saved. Dipper comes back to his own body disoriented, unsure of what happened while he was gone, and he looks at his hand and asks what Bill did to it. Mabel tells him it is nothing a little sleep cannot fix. That line is the whole episode folded into a sentence. The demon who came from the space between waking and sleeping is beaten in the end by the need for sleep, and the wounds he left behind are the kind that ordinary rest will heal. So this is Bill's first real time in the physical world, and it is a defeat, though not the grand one people sometimes remember. The punch that finally lays Bill out, the moment Stan physically knocks him down, belongs to a later chapter of the story entirely, to the Weirdmageddon finale in 2016. Here, in sock opera, there is no punch. There is a tired body, a sister who will not be tricked, and a demon who learned that a physical form is not only a toy, it is also a cage, and it gets tired and it can be closed. Most children's television never attempts the kind of ending this one does because it requires a story to spend something it can never earn back. Not a character exactly, and not a place, but a mind. The final hour of Gravity Falls is built around that expenditure, and to understand why it lands the way it does, you have to begin with the thing that makes the whole disaster possible in the first place, which is a lie Bill Cipher tells about where he comes from. By the time we reach the third and last part of Weirdmageddon, the episode called Take Back the Falls, Bill has already returned in force. The opening movement of this arc, the first Weirdmageddon, shows him coming back to take down the Pines family, and he does not come alone. He brings allies with him, a company of strange figures pulled out of whatever exists between worlds, and the town is remade in his image. That is the situation the finale inherits. The world is already broken. What the finale adds is the reason and the price. Ford is the one who learns the reason. In the confrontation, Bill reveals his true motives, and the revelation reframes everything that came before it. He tells Ford, in effect, that he originally came from a second dimension, one that he himself destroyed, and that the interdimensional portal, the machine that has haunted this family across 2 seasons, was never truly Ford's idea. It was Bill's. A young Ford was manipulated into building it, guided step by step toward a device whose real purpose was to let Bill's own dead world merge with Earth. Think about what that does to Ford's history. Every discovery he believed was his own genius, every night he spent alone with his blueprints convinced he was ahead of everyone, was a hand on his shoulder steering him toward the end of the world. The portal addiction that another telling has already explored from the inside now has a second face. It was never only a man losing himself to obsession, it was a man being farmed. That is the emotional weight the family carries into the last plan, and the plan itself is almost absurdly simple, which is part of why it works. Bill can be beaten, but only by being erased, and the tool for erasing is the memory gun that has floated at the edges of this story for a long time. The obvious move is to trap Bill inside a mind and then wipe that mind clean, taking him with it. The obvious mind is Ford's because Ford is the one Bill wants, the one whose thoughts Bill has been trying to enter. And here the plan hits its first wall. Ford cannot be the vessel, his memories cannot be erased for reasons the show never fully spells out, and the gun cannot reach past whatever is protecting them. The one man Bill most wants to possess is the one man who cannot be used as the trap. So Stan volunteers. This is the hinge of the entire finale, and it is worth slowing down for. Stan offers to let Bill enter his mind instead. To make the substitution work, the two brothers swap clothes and pretend to be each other, so that when Bill goes looking for Ford, when he steps into what he believes is the mind of the genius who built his doorway, He actually steps into the mind of the brother nobody in the story ever mistook for a genius. Consider the shape of that deception. Bill has spent the entire arc treating Stan as beneath his notice. The con man, the fraud, the one running a cheap mystery shack while his brother did the real work. The plan turns that contempt into the weapon. Bill cannot tell the twins apart because he never bothered to look closely at the one he considered worthless. Once Bill is inside, Ford raises the memory gun and fires it at Stan. And there is no trick to soften what that means. The gun does exactly what it is built to do. It wipes Stan's memories, all of them. And because Bill is now trapped among those memories, it erases Bill along with them. The two are destroyed together. There is no way to take only the demon and leave the man intact. To kill the thing that manipulated Ford for 40 years, the family has to empty out the mind of the brother who agreed to hold it. The image of the destruction itself is strange and quiet in its own way. As Stan's memories go, Bill's form begins to destabilize. He glitches, comes apart at the edges, the geometry of him failing as the mind he is standing in dissolves under his feet. And then Stan punches him. That is the last physical act of the confrontation, a fist thrown by a man who is in the process of forgetting his own name, and it shatters Bill into pieces. The most powerful being in the story, the one who orchestrated everything from a young man's first equation to the merging of worlds, ends not through some grand cosmic device, but by being struck apart by someone who will not remember doing it. Weirdmageddon ends there, inside a mind that is going dark. And the world answers immediately. With Bill gone, the damage he did to Gravity Falls begins to reverse. The townspeople who had been trapped, frozen, and hung up as decoration in his new order are freed. His remaining allies, the company he brought back with him, are pulled back into the interdimensional rift that let them through, and then the rift is sealed in an explosion, and that explosion restores Gravity Falls. The story is careful here about sequence. The world is not fixed because the heroes are clever. The world is fixed because the anchor of all its wrongness has been removed, and once he is gone, everything he distorted simply falls back into its proper place. The cost was paid somewhere else, privately inside one man's head, and the town gets its ordinary morning back without ever knowing what it cost. That is what makes the ending feel earned rather than merely triumphant. The victory and the sacrifice are the same event. You cannot separate the moment Bill dies from the moment Stan loses himself because they are one action, one pull of one trigger. A lesser version of this story would have found a loophole, some clever reversal that let the family keep everything. This one does not. It lets the plan work, and it lets the plan hurt. And it trusts a young audience to sit with the fact that the man who saved everyone did it by giving up the very thing that made him himself. I think that trust is the reason the episode has aged the way it has. It treats its viewers as people who can hold a real loss. It is worth stepping outside the story for a moment to see how the world received this. Take Back the Falls aired as a 1-hour series finale, first on Disney XD on the 15th of February 2016, and then a few days later, on the 19th on Disney Channel. Its first airing reportedly drew close to 3 million viewers, and by some accounts that stood as a high point for the series, arriving for the moment it ended. There is something fitting in that. The finale that spends a mind to close its story was also the episode the most people showed up to watch. The credited authorship of that hour is broad, and knowing it changes how you read the tightness of the plan. The episode was written by Shion Takeuchi, Mark Rizzo, Josh Weinstein, Jeff Rowe, and Alex Hirsch, and directed by Steven Sandoval. That is a room full of people, and yet the finale does not feel assembled by committee. The mechanism at its center, the metal plate that rules out the obvious vessel, the clothing swap that turns Bill's arrogance against him, the single shot that ends both the villain and the hero at once, is engineered with the economy of a good trap. Every piece that pays off in the last act was set somewhere earlier, and it takes a certain discipline across a writer's room to build an ending where the pieces lock rather than pile up. Audiences have gone on registering that discipline in the years since. Take Back the Falls holds a user rating of 9.8 out of 10 on IMDb, which places it among the very highest rated episodes the series ever produced. Ratings like that are a blunt instrument, and I would not lean on a number to tell you what a story is worth. But there is a pattern in which episodes of a show climb that high, and it is usually not the loudest ones. It is the ones where something is genuinely at stake and the story refuses to flinch from it. The finale of Gravity Falls sits at the top of its own series because it did the hard thing at the end, the thing most shows built for children carefully avoid, and it did it without apology. What lingers, once the town is restored and the rift is sealed, is the asymmetry of the whole design. Bill came from a dead world and wanted to drag Earth into the same silence, and he built his entire path through a lie about origins, convincing a brilliant young man that the doorway was his own idea. He was undone by a substitution so plain it should not have worked, by two brothers in each other's coats, by his own refusal to look closely at the one he thought was nothing. And the man who finished him did not survive the act intact. The greatest sacrifice the story could ask for was not a life, which would have been simpler, but a self, held out deliberately so that a demon could be shattered inside it. That is the fate the family arrives at in the end, and the show lets it stand exactly as heavy as it is, and then gives Gravity Falls its quiet mourning and closes. There is a particular cruelty in how Bill Cipher chooses to punish Gideon Gleeful, and it tells you something about both characters. During Weirdmageddon, Bill does not kill Gideon for his betrayal, and he does not banish him. He puts him in a cage, dresses him in a sailor costume, and forces him to perform a cute little dance routine for eternity. There is a cruel logic to the sentence. Gideon has spent the entire series performing, building a whole false empire out of charm and showmanship at his tent of telepathy, weaponizing sweetness to manipulate a town. Bill takes that same sweetness and turns it into the instrument of his suffering. The performance that was once Gideon's power becomes his prison. He is made to be adorable against his will forever, and the adorableness is the torture. And here is the quiet turning point that the finale threads through all of this. It is that punishment, that endless humiliating dance that breaks Gideon down and pushes his change of heart. He does not reform because someone lectures him, and he does not reform because he suddenly discovers a conscience he never had. He reforms because he is broken. Bill hollows him out until there is nothing left of the little tyrant, and what remains, once the performance stops mattering, is a boy who decides to help. After that collapse, Gideon joins Dipper and the others in the fight against Bill. The finale is making a fairly unsentimental point here if you follow it. Sometimes the road to becoming better runs straight through being humbled past the point of pride, and it is not a gentle road, and it does not feel like grace while it is happening. That is why his place in the finale carries a weight it might otherwise lack. When Ford draws his zodiac circle, a ring of 10 symbols, he needs 10 specific people to stand on it and hold hands, because only together do they generate enough power to defeat Bill Cipher. Gideon is one of the 10. He is the one-eyed star, the symbol matching his own tent of telepathy, the emblem of the con he ran on the whole town. So the very sign of his fraud becomes one of the 10 pillars that saves the world. Consider the geometry of that redemption. The thing he used to deceive people is now literally load-bearing. He is not forgiven so much as repurposed, and the circle does not work without him. Standing on that same ring is Pacifica Northwest, and she is worth pausing on for her own reasons. Her symbol is the llama, and she wears it in the form of Mabel's llama sweater, which is a small and telling detail. Pacifica, born into the wealthiest family in Gravity Falls, takes her place in the circle not in her own finery, but in a hand-knitted sweater borrowed from the girl who has been her opposite all season. The two children who most embody the town's extremes, the fraudulent showman and the pampered heiress, are both required, both standing, both holding hands with the rest. The circle does not care about their pasts, it cares that they are there, which brings the finale in its epilogue to the question of what happens to these people after the sky closes back up and the ordinary returns. The story does not give Gideon a clean ending, and I think that is one of the more honest choices it makes. In the epilogue, he does leave his criminal past behind after Weirdmageddon, and at Dipper and Mabel's 13th birthday party, he comes to the twins and tells them, in effect, that thanks to them, he will no longer do evil and will try to be a regular kid from now on. It is a sweet moment, and it would be easy to let it stand as the tidy resolution of his arc. The writers do not let it stand. because at that same party, when another kid mocks Gideon for falling off a skateboard, Gideon has his former prison gang associates beat the kid up. And there it is, the reform is real and the reform is incomplete, and both of those things are true in the same scene. He means it when he says he wants to be a regular kid, and he also still has the reflexes and the muscle of the person he used to be. And when he is embarrassed, he reaches for them without thinking. This is what change actually looks like in a person, especially a young one who was raised into cruelty. It does not arrive finished. It arrives as a genuine intention laid over old instincts that have not caught up yet. The show refuses to pretend otherwise, and it earns something by that refusal, a kind of respect for how slow and uneven the work of becoming better really is. If Gideon's epilogue is a redemption with rough edges, the Northwest is something closer to a straightforward fall, and the episode frames it almost as a fable. Preston Northwest, the family patriarch, loses the fortune, and the way he loses it is the whole moral in miniature. During Weirdmageddon, while trying to ally himself with Bill Cipher, he invests his savings into what the show calls weirdness bonds. Consider that phrase for a moment. He looks at the apocalypse, at the sky tearing open and reality coming apart, and his instinct is to find the angle, to buy in, to profit from the catastrophe by siding with the entity causing it. It is exactly the kind of calculation you would expect from a man who has always treated the town as something to be owned. And it is precisely that calculation that ruins him, because weirdness bonds are worth nothing once the weirdness is gone. So the epilogue shows Preston Northwest weeping outside the gates of Northwest Manor, having been forced to sell it to preserve whatever remains of the family's wealth. There is a grim symmetry in the image. The Northwest built their identity on that manor, on the gates and the walls that kept the town out. And now Preston stands on the wrong side of his own gates, locked out of the thing that defined him, crying. The barrier he used to separate himself from ordinary people is now the barrier separating him from his own home. The episode does not editorialize over this. It simply lets him stand there and weep, and it trusts you to feel the exact measure of pity and justice the moment deserves, which is some of each. And then it narrows the loss down to a single, almost comically small detail, which is where the writing shows its restraint. Priscilla Northwest, Pacifica's mother, tearfully tells her daughter that she will now only be able to have one pony. That is the line the writers choose to carry the family's collapse. Not the manor, not the bank accounts, but the ponies, plural reduced to singular. It is played for a soft laugh, and yet think about what it reveals about the world these people live in. In the Northwest household, wealth is measured in a scale of luxury so far removed from ordinary life that its ruin still leaves a child with a pony. And the tragedy from the inside is that there's only one. The joke and the pathos sit in the same sentence. A family has truly lost almost everything, and what remains would be unimaginable abundance to anyone else in Gravity Falls. Taken together, these two epilogues form a quiet study of consequence. Gideon rises, unevenly, dragged upward by humiliation into something better than he was. The Northwests fall cleanly, undone by the same greed that raised them. Neither ending is total, and neither is delivered with a lesson attached. The story simply lets each family arrive where their choices carried them and moves on, the way life does. Some satisfactions arrive only after a story has earned them, and the people who watched Gravity Falls closely tried, in their reviews and their rankings, to name what that satisfaction was made of. This final chapter is about them. Not the villains this time, but the response to their downfalls, the numbers fans assigned, and the sentences critics wrote when they sat down to explain why a cartoon about a small Oregon town felt heavier than it had any right to feel. The facts here are modest. What they point at is not. Consider first the raw measure, imperfect and blunt as it is. On the Internet Movie Database, where thousands of ordinary viewers register a score out of 10, the series finale, titled Weirdmageddon 3, Take Back the Falls, holds a rating of 9.8. That is close to the ceiling. Ratings that high are rare, and they tend to gather around endings that people felt were not just good, but correct. Endings that resolve something the audience had been carrying. The finale is where Bill Cipher finally falls, and the audience rewarded that fall with almost the highest number they had to give. But here's the detail that makes that number interesting. The very same score, 9.8, belongs to an earlier episode, Not What He Seems, the one that reveals Stan's secret at the portal, and sets up the confrontation with Bill that the finale eventually pays off. The implication is worth drawing out. The audience rated the moment the trap was set exactly as highly as the moment the trap closed. The setup and the payoff sit at identical heights. A story that can make its turning point as beloved as its ending is a story that understood the whole shape of itself in advance, and viewers, whether or not they could articulate it, felt that architecture and scored it accordingly. The critical response moved along the same lines, though critics have the advantage of being able to explain themselves. The AV Club published a review of the finale under a title that leaves very little room for hedging. They called it "Gravity Falls has the perfect ending." Their argument, as they laid it out, was structural. The weird Mageddon episodes, they wrote, make it clear just how impossibly powerful an adversary the heroes face, while gradually revealing how they could ultimately prevail. That is a precise observation about how a satisfying downfall is engineered. You do not simply announce that the villain is strong, you demonstrate the strength until it feels insurmountable. And then slowly, almost invisibly, you lay out the path by which the small and the ordinary might still win. The satisfaction is not that the heroes were always going to succeed. It is that success arrives only after the impossibility has been made real. And the way Bill actually falls is worth holding still for a moment, because it is not a battle in the ordinary sense. Grunkle Stan defeats Bill Cipher by luring him into his own mind, and then having Ford fire a mind-erasing gun at himself, wiping his own memories and Bill along with them out of existence. The most powerful adversary the series could conceive is undone not by a greater power, but by a man offering up everything inside his own head as bait. Stan loses himself in the process. Mabel later helps to restore his memory, which is the show reaching back to save the one who saved everyone else. But in the moment of victory, Stan does not know who he is. The downfall of the villain is purchased with the temporary erasure of a hero. That is a strange and difficult idea to put at the climax of a children's program, and the critics who called the ending perfect were responding, at least in part, to its willingness to make the cost that high. Another review from the animation site Bubble Blabber gave the finale a 9 out of 10 and put its finger on why the ending landed the way it did. The reviewer wrote that it was more fitting to have the battle come down to the two sets of twins, and that this choice reinforced the show's theme that family is everything. Look at what that observation does. It reframes the entire confrontation. The war against a god is decided by Stan and Ford, one pair of twins, standing in for and protecting Dipper and Mabel, the other pair. The scale of the conflict is cosmic, but the mechanism of victory is domestic. Two brothers who spent decades estranged and two siblings whose bond the series returned to again and again are the load-bearing structure the whole apocalypse rests on. The reviewer is saying that the downfall satisfies because it is thematically honest. Bill is a creature of manipulation and isolation, and he is beaten by the one thing he could never counterfeit. It helps to remember that this same standard of praise had been applied to Gravity Falls well before the finale, which tells you the ending did not come from nowhere. Go back to the first season, to Dreamscaperers, the episode in which Gideon invades Stan's mindscape. The AV Club called it more madly ambitious than just about anything else the show had done. They praised how it boldly experiments with different animation styles, creating a memorably surreal mindscape without ever letting the absurd elements overwhelm the show's underlying heart. That last clause is the important one. The surreal never swallows the feeling. Even at its strangest, the series keeps its hand on the emotional thread, and that discipline is exactly what would later let the finale stage a full apocalypse and still make the ending about two families. The season 1 finale itself, Gideon Rises, where Dipper and Mabel defeat Gideon and take back the Mystery Shack, sits a little lower on the audience scale, around 9.2 or 9.3, which is still very high for a first season conclusion. The AV Club gave it a straight A. Their critic Alastair Wilkins, writing in early August of 2013, praised something that sounds small but is not. He wrote that the episode shows an impressive knack for knowing which questions need answering and which can be safely ignored. That's a compliment about restraint. A lesser show, handed a season's worth of mysteries, tries to resolve all of them and chokes. Gideon Rises knew which threads to pull and which to leave hanging for later. And that judgment, that sense of proportion, is part of why its villain's defeat felt clean rather than cluttered. So the record from the critics and the crowd is consistent. High numbers on the setups and the payoffs alike. Reviews that keep returning to the same two ideas, that the series made its threats genuinely enormous and its victories genuinely earned, and that underneath every apocalypse it kept faith with family. But the response to Gravity Falls did not stay on the page or in a score out of 10, and the last two facts are where reception stops being something written down and becomes something people did with their bodies in the real world. Start with a whiteboard. Alex Hirsch, the creator, has said that while the writing staff was brainstorming how to defeat Bill Cipher for the finale, they left a whiteboard up in the Disney offices, and that whiteboard was titled How to Kill God. It stayed there, unerased, for months. There is something quietly perfect about that image. In the middle of a corporate animation studio, a sign posing the largest possible question about the smallest possible enemy, a triangle left hanging as ordinary office furniture while people walk past it every day. The problem of the villain's downfall was, for the people making it, a literal open question on the wall for a long time before it became the ending everyone rated 9.8. And then the audience took the puzzle out of the office and into the world. After the finale aired on the 15th of February 2016, Hirsch launched what he called the Cipher Hunt, a real-world alternate reality scavenger hunt. Fans decoded clues that led across multiple countries, all of it pointing toward a single physical object, an actual statue of Bill Cipher hidden somewhere on the planet. The hunt ran from the 20th of July to the 2nd of August 2016. On that last day in the evening, Pacific time, fans reportedly located the real statue in Reedsport, Oregon. It was later moved to a roadside attraction called Confusion Hill in Piercy, California, where it remains a thing you can drive to and stand in front of. Sit with the completeness of that. The show ends by luring the villain into a trap inside a mind and erasing him from existence. And the fans respond by turning the villain into an object, a statue, and burying him in the world as the prize at the end of a puzzle. So that finding Bill Cipher becomes an act of decoding, exactly the kind of decoding it trained its audience to do for 2 seasons. The defeat of the character on screen and the pursuit of his effigy across the map are the same gesture, performed once by the story and once by the people who loved it. That is what reception looks like when a downfall truly satisfies. It does not end when the credits run, it walks out the door and goes looking for the body. What connects every one of these downfalls is a single stubborn idea that the show never abandons, that power taken without care eventually meets the shape of its own cost. Bill Cipher, who trades in bargains and burns everything he touches, ends erased from the inside of the mind he tried to own. Gideon, who mistakes charm for control, loses the town the moment the town sees him plainly. Even the smaller figures, the ones who scheme for an afternoon and vanish, leave the same lesson behind them. Gravity Falls does not punish its villains to satisfy an audience. It lets them fall because the world it built has weight, and weight pulls everything down toward the truth of what it is. Consider what that asks of a show made for children and watched by everyone. Consequence is treated as a form of honesty. The people who lie to themselves are the ones the story cannot save, and the people who love each other, clumsily and completely, are the ones who remain standing when the strange summer ends. So the last picture is not a villain at all. It is a small town in the pines, quiet again, the anomalies settled back beneath ordinary ground, and a lamppost glowing over an empty road while the people who earned their peace sleep soundly inside it. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next.